The Crusades were a series of military expeditions launched by the Roman Catholic Church during the medieval period. There are many definitions for the Crusades. We will talk about what led to the Crusades, what did the Crusades do, and how did the Crusades shape our modern world today. To talk about the Crusades, we must first talk about the three religions that saw Jerusalem as their holy city: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Even though the Jews came first, they were mostly scattered around in small communities. The Christian faith gradually separated into two groups after the divide of Rome: the Roman Catholic Church in the west and the Greek Orthodox Church in the east, controlling Jerusalem. A few hundred years later, the rise of Islam led to the Muslims taking Jerusalem from the Byzantines. The lives of Christians and Jews did not change much until another group of Muslims, the Seljuk Turks, took Jerusalem from the Fatimid Egyptians. Unlike the Fatimids, the Turks are newly converted Muslims from the Eurasian steppes. They are nomadic riders who would attack and loot anyone, even other Muslims. Although the Seljuks did not forbid pilgrimage from other religions, some of the nomads did not hesitate to show their nomadic colors. The Seljuk tribes were also attacking Byzantine territory, and they crushed the Byzantine army at the Battle of Manzikert. The new emperor, Alexios Komnenos, asked Pope Urban II for help. The Pope saw this as an opportunity to reunite the Christian faith and to gain independence from the Holy Roman Empire by increasing its own prestige. The HRE and the Pope have an odd relation because the emperor, whose capital city is Rome, spends all his time north of the Alps. Princes and nobles south of the Alps find the Pope to be their leader instead of the emperor. This led to the emperor wanting to relocate the papacy and the Pope's retaliation in many ways. In the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban II called forth the First Crusade. For Christians, fighting in wars did not get people into heaven. Pilgrimage did, and the First Crusade could have been seen as armed pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land and fighting anyone who tried to stop them on the way. The primary drive for these people would be their religious devotion. The nobles were also supporters of the Pope. Alexios did not expect such a large military force. Still, with his cunning diplomatic skills, he managed to make an agreement with the leaders of the Crusade to return occupied Byzantine cities. The First Crusade turned out to be a massive military success. The Crusaders successfully took Jerusalem and set up various Crusaders' kingdoms along the coast of the Levant. In the meantime, the Islamic world was in division and infighting. At the time, the Islamic world was far more advanced than the West, and the Muslims saw the barbaric Crusaders with a curious eye. As news about the sack of Jerusalem spread through the Islamic world, Muslim intellectuals started to spread the notion of uniting against the Christian threat. Over a few decades, Muslims within the Christian territories became increasingly discontent. Internal power struggles also weakened the Crusaders' kingdoms. Eventually, the Muslim prince invaded Edessa, leading to the Pope calling the Second Crusade. The Second Crusade ended up not achieving anything. The Muslims united under Saladin and retook Jerusalem, which sparked the Third Crusade. By the time of the Third Crusade, the words jihad and Jerusalem were on the minds of every Muslim. The Islamic world was prepared. The Crusaders fought valiantly and successfully stopped the brunt of the Islamic forces, eventually signing a treaty that allowed Christian pilgrims to enter the city of Jerusalem. Although the Crusaders failed to retake the Holy Land, they did manage to secure footholds on the coast. During this time, the tension between the East and West intensified, as the Crusaders grew dissatisfied with the attitudes of the Byzantines. The Crusades have helped stimulate trade within the Mediterranean Sea. Trade cities such as Venice and Genoa profited, and the Byzantines became a roadblock on their way to achieving trade dominance. This tension was unleashed during the Fourth Crusade, where the Venetians abetted the Crusaders to siege and eventually sack the city of Constantinople. Crusading has become a casus belli for the Catholic Church against any enemies of the faith. Over the next few decades, the Church launched various crusades against Egypt and North Africa. The Mongol invasion in the east also helped the Crusaders and almost vanquished the Islamic world. However, in the Ninth Crusade, the Crusaders allied with the Mongols but were defeated by the Muslims. This led to the fall of Acre, the last foothold of a crusader in the Levant, thus concluding the Crusades. Despite popular belief, the Crusades did not help bring Europe out of the Middle Ages by connecting with the Islamic world. This is because connections have already been established between the Islamic world and the European traders. The Crusaders and the Pilgrims stimulated trading around the Mediterranean, but only several Italian trade cities benefited. The rest of Europe was mostly drained by the Crusades. Lords imposed extra tax in the name of the crusade, and all this money went into the hands of the traders. Eventually, the prosperity of the Italian region gave birth to the Renaissance. Still, some may argue that if the Fourth Crusade did not sack and destroy Constantinople, we might see the idea of Renaissance spread from the Byzantine Empire. The Crusades generated huge prestige and strengthened the power of the Pope at first. People who would participate in the Crusades also agreed to transfer their property to the church if they died in the process. However, as lords and nobles became less interested in later crusades, the Pope's power weakened. To avoid going on a crusade, the church promoted the idea of selling indulgences, which also led to the Reformation in the 16th century. The Crusades made the kings more powerful, which led to the decline of the feudal system and the power of the Pope. Feudalism is a system that revolves around people staying in one place for their entire life. A peasant would do the same job at the same place for his whole life, and his children would do the same. Most of the people who responded to the First Crusade were peasants. Some just wanted to see the world. Peasants began to rely less on their lords and could make a living in the cities. Cities grew more prosperous, and the tax and trade income go to the king. The king had enough money to hire armies to protect the towns, instead of relying on nobles. The power of the king was also strengthened because lords died fighting in the crusade, leaving their land to the king. Lords also sold their land to the king to raise funds for the crusade. This, combined with some other factors, caused feudalism to lose significance in European society. Muslims saw the Crusades differently. The Crusades were seen more as part of a continuous aggression from a barbaric European West who was assaulting the Muslims throughout the Mediterranean. However, although complete with stories of war and bloodshed, the medieval Muslim perspective is not as white and black as the Christian accounts. They detail many political and military alliances, systematic sharing of sacred locations, commercial dealings, scientific and intellectual exchanges, and other interaction between Muslims and the Crusaders. The focus on bloodshed has dominated modern attention in the Crusades. This complicated reality is primarily neglected and used to successfully anchor and disseminate the conversation about the common collision of civilization. As a result, there is Islamophobia and anti-immigrant attitude in the West. At the same time, there is Westophobia and paranoia in the Muslim world. Finally, although modern ideologues may wish to draw continuance and try to demonstrate how current problems are the same as the medieval ones, we must realize that Crusaders and Muslims fought for their own goals, not for the ones we have today. As put by Mark Cartwright, terms such as crusade, Christian, Muslim, and jihad continue, in both the East and West, to be used with ignorance and prejudice as labels of convenience by those who strive to make history instead of learning from it.